There's a certain kind of weight in the way we talk, not the heavy, obvious kind, not grief, tragedy, not crisis. The quieter kind, the kind that builds without anyone naming it. So before I start, I want to keep this framed correctly. This isn't a speech about how people should behave. It isn't a moral stance. It isn't a way to separate the good from the bad. It's something I've been tracking in real life, and it has consequences. If you can hold it as an observation, something you can test against your own patterns, then you're in the right place. Monday was about posture, that subtle stance where someone starts speaking about a person who isn't there, and the conversation quietly becomes a request. Not a request for help, not a request for clarity, a request for agreement. Wednesday was about the moment the request doesn't work. When you don't nod, when you don't join, when you reflect it back cleanly. When the person realizes they've wanted the release of saying it without the mirror of being seen saying it. But Friday is the part that matters most to me. Because these aren't just awkward conversations. They aren't just social habits. They're training. And the thing about training is that it doesn't ask your permission. It doesn't announce itself. And you become what you practice long before you notice you're becoming anything at all. Most people don't realize how much of their day is made up of third-person living. Not third-person conversation, third-person living. Where the center of gravity isn't your own life, it's someone else's. Someone else's choices, flaws, someone else's relationships, their failures, someone else's issues. It can look harmless because it's normal. People talk, people vent, people process. And some of that is real. But there's a difference between processing something that actually involves you and staying oriented around other people as a way of avoiding your own internal work. Because once that becomes a habit, it doesn't just shape what you say. It shapes what you feel. It shapes what you notice. It shapes what kind of connection you become capable of tolerating. And here's what I mean. There's a kind of closeness that gets built quietly when two people share something real. A story, a fear, a regret, a truth they don't usually admit. That kind of closeness has risk in it. You can be misunderstood. You can be judged. You can be seen. But there's also a kind of closeness that has almost no risk at all. It doesn't require exposure. It doesn't require honesty. It just requires a shared target, a third person. And once you introduce a third person into the center of a conversation, something becomes possible. Connection without vulnerability. You and I can feel aligned without having to reveal anything about ourselves. We can feel close without being known. We can bond without any real cost. And the reason that matters is because humans don't just want connection. We want safe connection. We want closeness that doesn't threaten our image. We want to feel like someone while staying protected. Third-person talk is one of the easiest ways to get that, and that's why it spreads. Not because people are evil, but because it works. But the cost doesn't show up right away. The cost shows up slowly in what it turns you into. Because every time you practice connection through a target, you reinforce a pattern. Closeness equals exclusion. Bonding equals distance from someone else. Safety equals we agree about them. And you can live like that for a long time without ever calling it what it is. It just feels like social life. It feels like being in the loop. It feels like being trusted. Because that's another piece people don't say out loud. When someone brings you third-person talk, part of what it signals is intimacy. It says, I'm letting you into something. It says, we're close enough for me to tell you this. This stays between us. So people accept it because it feels like being chosen. It feels like being inside. But what you're actually being invited into isn't intimacy. It's posture. And once you accept the invitation enough times, your nervous system learns it. Your system starts expecting that kind of connection. You start craving it. You start feeling strange when a conversation is simple and clean. You start getting restless when there isn't a target in the middle. And that's when you know something has shifted. Because now you're not just participating in the habit, you're dependent on it. This is where people get confused about why certain social environments feel draining. They'll say, I don't know why I leave those conversations feeling off, or I don't know why I feel heavy after being around them. But if you look closely, it makes sense. Because third person talk creates a kind of emotional residue. It leaves you with tension that isn't yours to carry. It leaves you with a posture you didn't choose consciously. It leaves you feeling slightly above someone, which sounds good until you realize what it does to you internally. Because superiority isn't stable, it's brittle. If you need to be above someone to feel safe, then you can't tolerate being questioned. You can't tolerate being evaluated. You can't tolerate being seen clearly. So the habit that starts as just conversations eventually becomes a defense system. And defense systems always have a cost. They keep you safe, but they also keep you small. One of the clearest signs that a person has been trained by this habit is how they respond to reflection. Not reflection in a harsh way, just basic, honest reflection. If you ask a clean question, if you hold up a gentle mirror, if you say something like, "What do you mean by that?" and the person reacts like you attacked them, something is off. The reaction isn't about you. It's about the posture. Because the posture can't survive light. It needs the room to stay slightly foggy. It needs the target to remain vague enough that the speaker doesn't have to carry responsibility. It needs agreement fast so the mirror never shows up. So when a mirror does show up, even softly, the posture panics. This is why you'll see people retreat into, "I'm just saying," or "You're taking it too seriously," or "I didn't mean it like that." They want the release without the mirror. And the reason that matters is because it tells you something deeper. They've been practicing a kind of connection that doesn't require accountability. So accountability feels like violence, even when it's gentle, even when it's fair, even when it's warranted. That's training. Here's another consequence people don't expect. That habit doesn't only shape how you talk to others, it shapes how you talk about yourself. Because when your attention is constantly pointing outward, you stop developing a relationship with your own inner life. Your mind becomes a commentator, not a builder. And that sounds small, but it's huge. Because commentary feels like involvement. It feels like intelligence, awareness. But commentary doesn't create movement. It doesn't create skill. It doesn't create direction. It creates an illusion of being sharp while your life stays untouched. And if you do that long enough, something strange happens. You start losing respect for yourself. Not consciously, quietly. Because deep down, you know the difference between being the kind of person who can speak well and being the kind of person who is actually becoming something. So the habit continues. More commentary, more opinions, more targets. Because those give you little hits of identity without requiring transformation. And that's why it matters. Not because it's mean, because it's a substitute for real work. When I say work, I don't just mean career. I mean internal work, the slow kind, the kind that doesn't get applause, the kind where you have to admit you're not fully who you want to be yet, the kind where you have to correct patterns you've been carrying for years, the kind where you have to take responsibility without being able to post a result, That's hard. So people look for relief. And third person living gives relief. It gives you something to say, something to feel, something to bond over, something to place your frustration onto. But relief isn't the same thing as growth. Relief is just relief. And a lot of people end up living off relief instead of becoming capable. One of the best ways I can describe the difference is this. Real depth has weight to it. It takes time to build. It comes from attention spent in the right place over and over for years. When you meet someone with depth, you can feel it. It doesn't demand you agree. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need a target. It just exists. And it makes the room better. Not because the person is impressive, but because they're substantial. They have something in them that was built, not borrowed. And that kind of person tends to speak differently. They speak in a way that carries responsibility. They don't throw things into the air and leave them there. They don't need the room to co-sign them so they can feel stable. They're stable already. So their words have less sharpness and more direction, even when they disagree, even when they critique. Because critique isn't their identity. It's just one tool in a larger structure. That's what third-person living slowly strips away. Direction. When you're constantly oriented around what other people are doing wrong, your own direction becomes blurred. Your standards become external. Your attention becomes reactive. Your mind becomes trained to scan. And scanning creates tension. Because scanning is never satisfied. There's always another flaw, another story, another target, another reason to feel above. And if you build a life around that kind of scanning, you can't relax. You can't settle. You can't be present. Because presence would require you to come back to yourself. And coming back to yourself would require you feel what you've been avoiding. So you keep scanning. That's not freedom. That's a loop. This is why I've started thinking of these conversations as environmental. Not just social, environmental. Like noise pollution. It doesn't matter if one sound is small. If you breathe it all day, it changes your system. It changes your baseline. It changes what feels normal. So when I say I've become more strict about it, I don't mean I'm trying to control anyone. I mean I'm protecting my own inner atmosphere. Because atmosphere matters. And if you live in fog long enough, you forget what clean air feels like. And clean air is underrated. Clean air is a conversation where nobody needs to be above anyone else. Clean air is exchanging something meaningful. It's learning from someone who has built something. It's two people being present without needing a target to hold the moment together. It's rare. And once you get used to it, you don't want to go back. There's another layer to this that I didn't understand for a long time. This habit doesn't only damage connection, it damages courage. Because courage isn't a personality trait. Courage is a practice. You build it by doing difficult things in small ways consistently. By saying what you mean when it matters. By standing behind your words. By being willing to be seen honestly, even when it costs you comfort. Third-person talk is the opposite of that. It teaches you to avoid risk. It teaches you to choose the safe version. It teaches you to have strong opinions in the lowest stake place possible. A person who isn't there. A room where nothing can come back. No response, no consequence, no mirror. That's why it's so tempting. It lets you feel bold without being brave. And if you practice feeling bold without being brave long enough, you become the kind of person who needs low-risk dominance to feel powerful. You need someone beneath you. You need a target. You need a room that nods. Because without that, you're exposed. And exposure is what you've been avoiding the whole time. So the habit continues. I'll keep it simple. If you want to know what third person living is doing to you, watch how you feel afterward. Not during. During, it can feel good. It can feel like closeness. It can feel like being in the loop. It can feel like having something sharp to hold. But afterward, see what's left. Do you feel clearer? Do you feel more grounded, more capable? Or do you feel foggy, agitated, slightly hollow, like you just spent energy without building anything? That residue is information. Because real conversations don't leave you feeling reduced. They leave you feeling awake, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they challenge you, even if they force you to adjust. There's a difference between discomfort that grows you and discomfort that just drains you. Third person living drains you. It spends your attention and gives you nothing back. So what does a cleaner standard look like? Not as advice, just as a personal boundary. For me, it's this. If someone brings me a posture instead of a purpose, I don't join it. If someone brings me a target instead of a direction, I don't pick it up. If someone wants to bond through negativity, I don't accept the bond. Not with speeches, not with lectures, just with absence. I don't feed it. I don't reward it. And if I feel that same impulse and rise in me, I do the same thing internally. I don't pretend I'm immune. I just treat it like a signal. A signal that my attention is trying to escape something in my own life. So I bring it back. Not to shame myself, to orient myself. Because the goal isn't purity. The goal is authorship. To keep my life moving from the inside rather than being pulled around from the outside. And this is the final layer of the week. The habit isn't about other people. Not really. It's about what kind of person you become when you repeatedly choose the lowest cost form of connection. Because you will become something, whether you mean to or not. The posture you practice becomes your posture. The tone you repeat becomes your tone. The kind of bond you accept becomes your kind of bond. And when you look up one day, you'll either find yourself surrounded by meaning or surrounded by targets. So here's the question I'll leave this week with. If you don't have anyone to talk about tomorrow, would you feel free or exposed?